Measuring sustainability in agriculture. Sustainability has been a big marketing phrase, but have we ever actually quantified it? That's what we're talking about in this episode of The Business of Agriculture. Are you looking for productive efficiencies in growing higher yielding, better performing crops? New Fields Ag provides a complete portfolio of biological products focused on you, the farmer. Visit newfieldsag.com for more information to help you farm better. Hey there, welcome to another fantastic episode of The Biz of Agriculture. You know what? We cover great stuff here. It's because I got great topics and I got great guests. This guy, Ben Bardsley, is the founder and CEO of a company called BX. It is an environmental intelligence platform that actually promises to track and measure and quantify sustainability. Let's face it, it's the year 2025. We've been tossing the word sustainability around for a solid decade now. Every corporation talks about sustainable. Agriculture got hit with this whole sustainable. I pointed out more than a decade ago, it's sustainable is only sustainable if it actually is profitable. So what are you talking about here? Are we actually making money? Because agriculture is a business, and God knows it's oftentimes a very low margin, highly capital intensive business. So if we're going to go down the road of sustainability, and the consumer wants that, not to mention we want that. We in agriculture would love to use less resources to produce the same or more amounts of output and to spend less money on all the sort of things from the synthetic inputs to even natural inputs. We can do this, and we are doing it. But have we ever actually put a pen to paper and said, what are the numbers? Ben Bardsley says he is doing that. So he's the founder of this company, been in business now for 4 years, going into his fifth year. Kind of exciting stuff. And by the way, much needed. Ben Bardsley, welcome to the show.
Hi, Damian. Great to see you, and thanks for having me on.
So your background is agriculture, and you started this company. So go ahead and let's talk a little bit about what BX is, and then I want to get into the background that inspired this.
Cool. Yeah, so BX, as you said, and you framed it very nicely, as a environmental intelligence platform connecting the grower or the farmer with their consumer to take off the cloak that is sustainability, using data, using verified data to tell a story, to get the supply chain to buy into that story. And then once they're bought in, there's a way of monetizing that on our platform.
We've been hearing, and you told me you're just turning 40, so you've been around this game long enough that sustainability, I started seeing it on the social media and the various marketing more than a decade ago. And I made the point, ask 100 people to define sustainability and get 100 different answers. I'm not sure that we're any less foggy on the definition of what sustainable is than we were back then. Maybe used less now as a marketing phrase as it was, but it's still out there, and I think it's still fairly ambiguous. You agree?
Yeah, completely. I think you mentioned earlier, the consumer still cares deeply about what's going on, and farmers care deeply about being sustainable. The most important thing is financially sustainable, right? You've got to be financially sustainable, otherwise it doesn't work. And my background as being a farmer is I've been there. I've done that. I've got the T-shirts of what it's like to be a farmer on a coalface, and it's tough, super tough. So we've got to help. We've got to enable data to be that enabler to enable farmers to be more sustainable and get paid for it.
Is it as simple as saying we're BX, all we're going to do is track your inputs, your purchases of everything from fertility to insecticide to herbicide to diesel fuel you use, and then we're going to cross-reference that against the actual output, and boom, there's your, that's more of an efficiency than a true measure of sustainability. So what is the concept?
I mean, sustainability, as you said, is a wide word. You're looking at all things from soil health and carbon in soils through to biodiversity, water usage, and then into waste and energy. So it's depending on what you want to, the story that you want to tell to your customer. And in doing so, how do you unlock the sustainability profile to get paid for it? And that's the most important thing. I think having been the second largest fruit farmer in the UK, I really struggled to communicate my message with my end consumer. And that was because we as farmers are not very good at communicating messages. We're very good at growing, but not communicating.
Ben, you might have just, I don't know if you went and looked at some of my old stuff, but I think I started saying that to my audiences somewhere around 20 years ago. You people are amazing at production. You suck at promotion. You're amazing at production. You suck at promotion. I think I sound like a broken record, but that's because what are we ingrained in us in agriculture? Make more stuff, grow more pounds, push out more bushels, and that's what we love to do. We suck at promotion. And oftentimes, as you said, I'm not sure that a lot of times we really understand our consumer. We think that they're like us. They are not.
I mean, often a farmer doesn't know their consumer, and that's the main problem. You know, if you don't know your consumer who's actually consuming that food on a daily basis, how can you actually unlock something that you want them to buy into? You know, we are very, as at the farming world is very sort of white labeled. Yeah, you grow something, you push it into a pack somewhere or into a processor, and you never see it again. The farmers that are doing best right now are the ones that control the supply chain from start to very end and have a brand in there that they can communicate. They're also very close to their retailers as well. You know, the big brands that we're working with, the big farmers, I should say, that we're working with, they are in control of the whole thing. And that's where you can see great gains using data to communicate that story.
Okay, now that's the biggie. And you happen to be relocated from Great Britain to, is it still okay to call it Great Britain? You called it UK. England, Great Britain, UK. I mean, are they universal or is there really a difference? You tell me.
They're the same thing.
I know.
Same thing.
I know. I know. Okay. So you're in Yakima. Obviously, you're out there in fruit country in the Pacific, inland Northwest, depending on who you talk to. But you're largely stuck in with fruit. And you just talked about vertically integrated farming all the way to, you know, the consumer is where you can see big gains. Before we get into who your customer is and doing that, the impetus for this was you were a fruit producer across the Atlantic. And you said, I heard you say, I struggled to communicate what I was doing for sustainability to my consumer. The reality is, the farmers, usually their role isn't that they have to do the marketing. It should be the jobber, the processor, the retailer. That's generally not been your role. When I make a crack that farmers suck at promotion, generally they haven't had to. Their job is to go out and bring in truckloads of stuff. That changed.
Yeah, it's changing very quickly. And, you know, every farmer is a businessman. And what the great businessmen do globally across every commodity or product is they communicate very well to their end consumer. Our customers are retailers, right? Farmers, mostly their customers are retailer or a co-op. They rarely think about their end consumer. And I think that's where the shift has got to come. And the only way that the end consumer, the person that's actually eating that commodity, will care is if it's through verified data sets. You've already said that sustainability has been a word that's been thrown around for 20 years now, and the consumer is pretty tired, I believe, of what they're reading. But if you can verify with data that's backed by a company like BX, I mean, there's many companies like BX, then you can then get a real story going. But the retailer is vitally important in this, right? They have huge amount of power, control, but they are also in the business of selling fantastic product. So if you can work closely with that retailer through verified data, I passionately believe that farmers can start to really unlock the huge sustainability value that will come.
So you've got you just said a lot of stuff there, and it's all accurate. You've got to find who cares to pay the premium for the actual measurability of the sustainability story. And this gets into a tough one, Ben. Ask 100 consumers walking into a store, better yet, will they pay a premium to know that something had a higher degree of sustainability in its production model than the stuff next to it? And 100 of them will say, oh, God, yes, I care. Oh, I care. And then follow them in with a hidden camera and watch their purchase decisions. And if it's 25 cents more for the product that has the story and the one that does not, good 70 to 90% of the customers that in the parking lot on the way and told you they'd pay a premium for something that had quantifiable sustainability won't actually put their money where their mouth is. That's a reality, and it's a challenge as well.
I totally agree. I'm completely in line with that view. But if you look at the ROI of sustainability, price premium is the last stage of 6. If you ask the same consumer, would you go into a retailer and pick up, let's say, an apple, and one is verified being sustainable and the other isn't, just a normal apple, and it's the same price, which one would they pick up? So where we see it is we're helping farmers look at this differently. So if I go through just quickly the 6, as I see it, the 6 ROIs of sustainability. Yep. The first is regulatory compliance, right? This world is blowing up right now. Every month, every quarter, every year, farmers are getting more and more questions about where their foods come from, what they've done to grow it, all the different questions, which are just painful to fill out the questionnaires, the spreadsheets. And that's the first thing. The data sets that we collect help them with that process, number one. Second ROI sustainability is customer retention. We go back to that customer who is buying that product. So in this case, let's call it the retailer. They will be more willing to give you more business, have you as a supplier if you are creating this verified sustainability story for them, because they're under the same pressure from their shareholders and also their customers.
Yeah, and the reality is retailers in most everything, but certainly in the food space, they work on exceedingly tight margins. And they would, I don't think I'm not being mean to the Costco's, the Walmarts, the Kroger's, the Winn-Dixies, name them. I don't think they give two hoots in hell what's on the shelf. They care about turning it over and getting margin. And if your pitch is this thing, this loaf of bread, peck of apples, whatever it should be, carries with it a sustainability, verifiable sustainability number that's going to help it fly off the shelf more, great. Because you know what? I just have to churn and keep making my 1.7% margin or whatever it is that they work on. So I see that part of it. I appreciate the fact that, Ben, you said you're not sure that it commands a premium to the consumer, but maybe it just churns the inventory more when it's compared to something that doesn't carry the sustainability number. You don't think the consumer is going to pay a premium per se. They might, but you think what it does is it makes it a more marketable food item.
I think in the retail section, yes. But then you then talk about brands. We also work with brands directly. We're working with some big beer brands right now. They care deeply about this, and they do monetize sustainability because their brand, the backing of their brand is normally sustainability is one thing that they sell. So it just depends on how you're doing it. There are some very successful case studies we have at BX with premium fruit brands, people that control the right of a brand, and they are controlling it. They've got their customer. They communicate to their customer, and they also care about this. So I think that if you're a farmer who's got 10,000 acres of row crops, who sends it into some kind of processing factory to go to one day it becomes bread, that's one side of farming right now. But as I see it, farming is consolidating at such a pace. We all know that. You've done some fantastic episodes about the capital that's flowing into farming right now, and that consolidation is happening as a result. The farmer has to be connected to that end consumer. Yeah. Doesn't matter if you're a loaf of bread or you're a highly valued brand that sells directly to that consumer, you have to be unlocking it through data. I was going to finally say, data is the new currency of farming. The AI revolution that we're in right now, farmers need to be looking at the things they're doing. They have got so much data, so much good stuff they're doing, but they're just not either gathering it, they're not verifying it, and they're certainly not communicating it. And that's what my platform is helping farmers do.
Yeah, and more importantly, they maybe aren't capitalizing on it in all those regards. Okay, I want to hear more about once you take through a case study when you talked about who is benefiting by your product, and also some real life examples. Before I do that, I want to talk to you about my friends over at Harvest Returns. Agriculture companies need every cutting edge they can get today in all aspects of their business, including finance. Agriculture is a globalized business, as we're talking to Ben here. You can understand that. And it's competing. You're not just competing with the producers in the next county or state, but also with the farms around the world. So why are you still getting your financing the same way you always did? Let's face it. There's conventional loans, there's agricultural lenders. We get all that. But what if you have an agribusiness that needs funding and it's not going to fit the template of a traditional bank or institution that just comes in and does their usual template? You need a way to get a hold of your money. Talk to my friends at Harvest Returns. Harvest Returns has 18,000 investors putting money up for agricultural businesses, farms, ranches, and agribusiness that need creative financing. You can make this work. You want to learn more? They provide flexible terms that help you manage your cash flows and safely grow your operation. If you want to learn more about how you can get started with growing your operation through Harvest Returns, go to harvestreturns.com, harvestreturns.com. You talked about who can really capitalize on this, but go back to your own background. You're in your fifth year, 5 years ago. Did you say, you know what, I'm going to invent this thing. I'm going to use artificial intelligence, which wasn't even a thing 5 years ago. We can admit that. You might give yourself credit and say you saw it coming, but I'm going to question that. And you said, here's what I'm going to invent, and here's who's going to use it. Were you that methodical? Were you that clairvoyant? Or did you say, I got this idea, and now it's evolved 7 times into now where it is?
Great question. So my family business, Bardsley, England, I was the fifth generation to join that business, and we grew it pretty aggressively over a 10-year period when I came back from the British Army.
Fruit production.
Fruit production. We were apples, pears, cherries in Kent, UK.
And Kent, did you have vertical integration? Were you the producer as well as the processor, grader, distributor?
Yeah, so that's the thing that I did when I came back to run the company was that as I saw that you have to be connected to your retailer, and we spent we raised investment and spent a huge amount of money on that middle bit to make sure that we were relevant. We became very close to our retailers. I think the retailers have got such incredible. There's an opportunity for retailers if you're on the right side of wrong with them, and I believe passionately they are one of the solutions going forward. Whereas some farmers don't like them, I think that they offer huge opportunity to sell an awful lot of product, and if you work closely with them, then you can really grow a really successful business.
Well, you mean some farmers don't like retailers because there's this idea that I'm only getting 14 cents out of every food dollar, blah blah blah, and you want to tell them there's 19 steps between you and the consumer's plate. Yeah. They're not all getting rich off of the in between, but there's that perception apparently in the UK as well as here, right?
It's the same. It's the same. Farmers are price takers, and that's the problem we've got. There's not a single commodity right now that's doing well, probably because everyone's price taking, and we're also cost taking as well, which is crazy to think. You're sort of sandwiched in the middle. But anyway, going back to my story. So yeah, I saw it. We grew our business quite aggressively. We took some investment, a minority investment with a big food operator, and we. Grew the business very quickly. We had 19 sites across Kent, UK, about 3,500 acres before we ended up exiting the company in 2021. But in that journey, I just saw the opportunity. I was like, we've got all this data. I've got 2.4 million trees planted across my organization, and I cannot monetize sustainability any more than I can monetizing 1 kilo of apple or 1 pound of apple. Right. It was just like crazy. And I spoke to my father, who's a fourth generation. My father's a farmer, good guy, great sort of grower, knew a lot about trees. And I said, Dad, look at all this, in theory, the carbon we're putting into the soils and the oxygen we're emitting, but we're not getting paid for it. So he got behind this whole thing that I was looking at. I then went on a pretty big trip around the world, and I went to pretty much every major fruit producing continent in the world or country in the world. And I found some incredible businesses. My God, global agriculture is insane. It's just incredible. The people, the climates, the geography, the product, the innovation. And I was just blown away. But I didn't find any software that was helping these farmers. I just saw a lot of generic software that had been built in the old school way of building software. And I just said, hey, there's an opportunity here. I then looked at my friends in the UK who worked in London in the banking and insurance industry. They were making a huge amount of money. They always drove the nicest cars. They had the nicest houses. They wore the nicest clothes because they were using data every day to make money for their companies, right? And I was like, hang on a second, this has got to be a thing. So that's where BX was born. And we started the business I incubated it inside my farming business for the first year. And then when we sold our farming company, we then spun it out into its own company, raised some seed investment from a VC and a few high net worths. And then we've been on an amazing journey since. And I think if I hadn't have been that fruit farmer, hadn't have seen the problem, I would be struggling to unlock the market that we're unlocking now. Because I think like a farmer, this software is built for farmers by farmers because it's tough. It is really hard.
So a few things. Your old man, your dad, your father, grew up in the ag space, worked in the ag space, owned in the ag space, and you could see a reluctance, which always happens. The kid comes back and says, Dad, you didn't say you're doing this wrong. You're saying, holy craminetly, we're missing out on an opportunity. And then he probably said, what are you talking about? We sell apples. Nobody's going to pay for this magical word that we've been tossing. I'm sure the UK was using the sustainability BS phrase long before it was over here, because let's face it, you guys are more dialed into environmental marketing in Europe, usually a decade before we were. Am I right about that?
You're correct. Yeah.
And your father probably said, yeah, I don't know how the hell do we make money off of telling everybody we're sustainable. We're already doing that. It's a label on our box.
That's right. We thought that by filling out an audit, that was telling that story, which is not the case. Audits do not tell that story. That is just a level of compliance you need to supply a product. So my father and I, we those that know me back in the UK, if they listen to this, will laugh because we fell out. We jostled. We jostled hard, but we always respected each other for each other's view. And after a couple of years of really understanding deeply the industry, our business, where we sat, we realized that we either get big and do this or we don't, and we sell out. That was in 2013, 2014 was that conversation. That's when we took investment. That's when we went really big and we decided to scale. So we went from 275 acres to the 3,500 acres I mentioned earlier in the space of 8 years. We made 4 acquisitions, spent a lot of money on our supply chain, but still, the thing that that I was just disenfranchised was with, hang on a second, I'm scaling my business. I studied economics at university. The gross margin is not coming through. The economies of scale is not coming through. I'm getting bigger, but I'm getting less profit margin and more risk.
Yep.
And I thought, this is not good. And that's when I then faced into this data problem, got really hyper interested, obsessed about this, and then looked at it as an opportunity to help farmers globally. Fast forward 5 years to where we are today. We've got 75,000 acres on our platform. We're scaling to 250,000 acres right now. We've raised $11 million in our process from VCs and high net worths. And yeah, really well set up.
By the way, to the person that's listening to this, if you listen to Business Agriculture, we've talked about money on here a lot, from the ag lenders to all sorts of the investor class to some of the recent episodes about where investment trends are and some of the stupid shit that people are spending money on in agriculture that nobody ever asked for. So obviously when Ben's talking about high net worth, you're talking like the family office, wealthy families that say, yeah, I'll put $2 million into this kind of thing, the venture capital people. And then is your father still involved?
No. Father, when we sold the farming business, Dad retired.
So it's you and it's your investors, and they give you autonomy to be the CEO and run this company.
Yeah, I put a lot of my money into it as well. So when we sold the farming business, I put 75% of what I made from that into this business. So I was one of the big backers earlier on, which meant
Is it safe to say then that you're fully vested?
I probably shouldn't say the word because it's a family show, but yeah, I'm pot committed, they would say. There's another word of saying that, but yeah, I'm pot committed, and we're all in. I've got my 3 daughters, my wonderful wife, and us. We've moved 5,000 miles into Yakima, Washington State, which no one's ever heard of in the UK because it's just one of those places. But in the fruit farming world, it's an epicenter. It's where
so in the UK, they know of New York, Washington, D.C., California.
Seattle. They know Seattle. So I always say we're couple of hours east of Seattle, which normally gets a nod.
So talk about where you got 75,000 acres. And I'm obviously a self-employed guy for 31 years. I always cheer on small biz and not so small biz and entrepreneurialism and all that kind of stuff. I want to talk about how you get your first customer. I want to talk about how you wrangle that in. And the more important thing is, you said you're going to scale. You think you're going to basically 3 times your customer base in terms of acres is what you just told me. I want to hear about that. Before I do, time for another commercial break for my friend at Redox. With a new growing season underway, the superior nutrition from Redox Bionutrients makes a major difference come harvest time. Redox provides carefully sourced nutrients that are combined with biostimulants that have been proven winners since Darren Moon began this company 31 years ago. Darren Moon started in specialty crop, and like the stuff that we're talking about here with Ben, moved into turf, now increasingly into broad acre. So we're talking about biostimulants, products that can be used to decrease your reliance on synthetic fertilities, harsher chemistries, et cetera, these kinds of things. Redox has a new product called DiCap, which provides stress defense, unequaled stress defense, and increasing plant respiration and antioxidant production. It's a fantastic source of potassium and phosphorus. You can find out more about DiCap and the entire Redox lineup. Go to redoxgrows.com, REDOX, redoxgrows.com. Check it out. What's the plan? First off, tell about the existing customer right now of BX. You've been, you've knocked out 4 years. I'm sure you took some lumps. You went through some slowness. You got on farms. You've got a customer base. You have revenue, much more than back in the .com craze when there was a lot of new ideas and new technology, and the company's never had a customer. You've got customers. You've got revenue. Tell me what the customer looks like. Clearly, it's probably in the fruit business. If you're in Yakima, you've got a bunch of them right around home, I guess.
So look, I'm a former farmer, right? What do I know about how to run a tech company? I've had to learn my trade, and it's been tough. Going from farmer to tech entrepreneur has been super difficult because you go from thinking about boxes, minimum, very, very small margins to burn rates, raising money, and the future, right? Very, very different. So I recognized quite early on we needed to find our first early customer that was going to really back us. That's number one thing to do, right? The market was interesting. Revenue is important. So I was very fortunate that, and I'm happy, I'm sure they're happy for me to use their name in this podcast, but the Borton Fruit family, the Borton family who own Borton Fruit, they put a sizable check into me back in 2022. They also became our first customer. So my first customer was also an investor and also a huge kind of supporter of what we've done since. That then helped me establish my presence here in Washington State as our first sort of, we landed here. And then what we did is we used them to help us develop the software in the initial that following year. Once we built what you call the minimum viable product, like what does it look like, how's it going to work, then we started selling it. We started selling properly November 2023 is when we sort of launched the sales plan, and then we've scaled from effectively 6,000 acres to 75,000 acres since then. We'll be 250,000 acres by the end of the year, and we hope to be between 500,000 and 1 million acres by the end of next year. Now, interesting, how are we going to do that? And this is the key thing that maybe your listeners will be interested in is farming is 3 buckets right now, as I see it. You've got your small vertically integrated brand-led businesses that are doing very well, normally feature in the wine world, the viticulture world. They own their brand, they're very sustainable focused, and they want to have someone like BX to help them tell their story.
So when you talk about viticulture and wine, you're saying they're one of the buckets that you said, and what differentiates them is they're not usually great, very large, but they have a brand, and so I'm guessing you're going to tell me that the rather than savings of inputs, maybe the sustainability measurability factor is important because it's more of a marketing thing for them. It helps create consumer feel good more than like cutting back on inputs, I'm guessing, maybe.
Exactly. And the wine world is super interesting. They've been brand led from day one, and there's some insanely successful wine brands out there, but they're also really tough, right? They're not exempt from the global ag sort of commodity slowdown. They need to find a point of difference. And so by working with BX, they are getting better position with their customers and the ability for the distributors to communicate directly with those customers. So that's really good for us. And, the wine world is refreshing because they are so passionate about sustainability.
Yep.
They really care about it. And the action on farm is great. Then we've got our second bucket, which is these like vertically integrated, we call them the mid-size operators. They are sort of, between 2,000 and 15,000 acres, vertically integrated. So they're doing the growing, they're doing the packing, processing, distributing, and then they have very good relationships normally with their customer, normally a retailer. And those guys are super interesting because they've, for years built amazing businesses. You're talking huge businesses, very, very big turnover businesses, and have had quite a few years of amazing profitability, but now it's slowing down and things are changing. And what we're seeing now is hope is no longer a strategy.
Yeah.
It is an oversupplied market. It's not going away. So they have to go away from next year will be better, we hope, to, okay, how are we going to navigate this? What's the so what? The so what is technology. The other so what is, do we sell out to an institutional fund and join the party? Or do they do something around brand led and do something different with the entrepreneurial spirit that they have within them? And so we just try and position ourselves to support that viewpoint, whatever they do. Then the final bucket, which for BX is very, very exciting right now, is we are working with large global asset owners. Agriculture is consolidating at pace. Those large vertically integrated asset owners are normally owned people operating out of New York, Boston, London, wherever it might be. They are acquiring a huge amount of land, but they struggle to put it into one place. They struggle to see the whole portfolio in one place.
Now, Ben, are you talking about they just own the production, or are they buying like Dole Banana? I mean, whatever. Are they buying like a brand that is also a brand and a product and shitloads of acres and 5 processing facilities? Is that what you're talking about?
I think it's a mixture of both. So you've got people buying farmland who then lease it to farmers. There's people buying farming businesses that then get the owners of that business to run, or the former owners of the business to run the farm, or they then buy a brand or a business that there's many acquisitions happening right now in that space. But what's happening here is that the entry point for these guys right now is very good because the discounts available as a result of the ag sort of slowdown or downturn. But they have the same problem. They want to see their data. They're reporting to their shareholders about the natural capital of their assets. Now, if you invest in soil health, invest in biodiversity, increase your soil health to reduce your water usage, that asset should be worth more than someone that's not. And this is super interesting. And we're helping them take off that, that cloth of, we're using data to provide that information. And then on top of that, we're starting to develop conversations with banks and insurance companies. You mentioned Harvard's returns there, one of your sponsors. They're pretty cool what they're up to. But I guarantee they would say if they had more data about that farmer, they could make more guaranteed lending decisions, which would reduce interest rates, potentially have access to more lending in terms of insurance products. And we see that data being monetized in that way as well. So when we talk about this ROI of sustainability, it's not just going and getting more money for that product. It is a whole ecosystem of data that is being unlocked bit by bit. And that's why I say, I go back to that point, data is a new currency for farmers and they need to really get behind this, but they need help. Farmers are farmers. They're very good at doing certain things, but they do need wonderful software companies to support them on that. Mm-hmm. And ag tech, data providers as well.
Well, and the thing is, there's been an explosion of that for the last several years. You're one of them. That's the technology space in agriculture has had a explosion of new companies, new ideas, and some of them are obviously going to go by the wayside because that's the way it is with an explosion of anything, a new category. I do agree that obviously we're oversupplied. You listen to my stuff. That seems to be an absolute newsflash to many people outside of ag and even in ag, and there's the separation thing. Now, the reality is, most new technology, Ben, that comes to ag promises to increase efficiencies, and I've always said that's neat, that's great. All we've ever done is work on, which is a supply thing. Your stuff would do the same. Hey, we're going to make it more sustainable, and now we can grab more acres, but the other play on this I see is alternative revenue. Clearly, we don't need any more supply. So everything we've ever said, make it more efficient to create more bushels, make it more efficient to grow more pounds. We don't need any more. The reality is we need more demand or we need alternative diversification of revenue. Can BX help me make money in these things like sustainability markets where I go and say, I've got this 10,000 acres of fruit trees and I'm sequestering carbon. And I've also, because of my involvement with BX, I was monitoring and measuring my sustainability. And also I took 20% of applied water off of those acres, 20% reduction on applied fertility. Can that not only create efficiencies, but can it help me make money from some environmental sustainability program that we hear about? United Airlines is going to give me money to prove that I'm using less natural resources.
100%. So one of the sides of that platform is creating carbon credit projects or insetting projects for our clients. So if you're working with the BX platform, we can help you bring together a soil carbon project or a biochar carbon project to sell to big companies that are prepared to buy it. Normally in the tech space, there's a lot of demand right now for high quality carbon removal credits. So that's one side of the platform. And, we sort of go in with the proviso. There's about $20 an acre back to the farmer. So it's not going to move the needle. It's not going to make you a millionaire.
$20 back to the farmer if we use your stuff. And that's because of savings or because of the ability to sell some program?
Yeah, so they've got to show action, right? They've got to show that they are sequestering more carbon on the soil carbon program. They've got to, increase their cover cropping, or they've got to reduce their reliance on herbicides or reduce their fertilizer. Yep. They've got to do something to move the needle, and if they do that something, they'll get paid. But more interestingly for us, and I think
you teamed up with one of the multitude of carbon broker companies.
Yeah, so we are the project originators. We work with the various verification bodies out there. You would have heard probably Vera or Pure Earth. And then we sell the product, sell the carbon credits on behalf of our farmers. So we're kind of creating the market too on the other side. We are working increasingly more with brokers on the sales side because the market's changing at the moment. But high quality biochar credits that are very, very wanted globally. So if I could just spend a couple of minutes on biochar, I think farmers globally need to really get their head into biochar because it took me a while. Like this is not new. This is relatively new stuff for farming.
The biochar thing, you're the third. I've asked people to come on and talk about it. You're the first ones actually doing it. So by all means, roll.
I don't want to bore you, but it's a super cool thing. So basically, at a high level, you take if you're a fruit farmer or any kind of perennial cropping that can be chipped, you chip that at the end of life of the orchard. You chip it down into like a 2-inch wood chip. You then send it to a biochar facility, and that biochar takes that 2.5-inch wood chip and turns it into a dust that comes off the barbecue kind of thing. Is how I can explain it. A very fine biochar dust.
Right.
And that biochar is then a very, very high concentrated carbon product that has the ability to lock that carbon for a very long time. But now the next thing is really important is how do you get that back to the ground? Because that's one thing. So what you then we're seeing is then work with a compost manufacturer, mix that biochar in with high quality compost. And we're seeing anything from 10% biochar to 30% biochar mixes, and then return that biochar, that compost back to the farm. Yeah, so the farmer is then getting a product that they're spreading the farm. It's helping with reducing the nutrients requirement. So we're seeing an example right now with a hop farmer here in Washington State. They've applied we're calling it magic soil, this sort of 20% infused compost, and they've backed off their fertilizer regime by 30% year one. That's a huge saving in just inputs alone, and they're not seeing a reduction in yield. I think ag over fertilizers. I think there's a lot of people would agree with that. We over fertilize because it's fear, right? I remember when I was a farmer, if you don't fertilize, you're not going to get the yield. If I don't get the yield, I don't get my profitability, and we're losing money.
Yeah, so it's like it's been a cheap insurance policy because historically fertilizer has been fairly affordable. And first, it's the fear of, oh my God, if I don't do this, then the neighbors will judge me and I might lose yield and all that. And you're right. Now, how does your software, how I can get we're measuring, but how are you helping me do those reductions and then bring it all together? The BX involvement with this. And then
so you're on board with the platform. We know where you are. We know exactly where your field is. We've got your data about that field. So we build everything up in field level. I think that's one of the key differentiators between BX and anyone else is that we care deeply about the field, and everything that then goes from the field up to the very top level. So from that field, a collection of fields make up a project. We then measure, report, and verify what's happening. So what action, what reduction inputs, it has to be verified by us. We then work with various SAC companies and other MRV companies to bring that project to life. There's a few more hoops that we have to jump through on behalf of our clients. And then once that comes together, we then get verified by someone like Pure Earth or Vera. And then we then generate these credits. Once the credits are generated, we sell them. So the thing about being a farmer is this is quite complex science we're talking about. Like if you look at I've got 22 full-time employees at BX. Half of them are technology and half of them are science. To give you an idea, we have a lot of scientists and we have a lot of technology people, but the science is key here. Once we come and help you generate that project, then you have an opportunity to earn through our platform. But it's not just carbon credits. I would say carbon credits represents 25% of the things we can do for you right now. And in time, that will become less and less. But it is a lovely hook. It's a wonderful thing that a farmer can say, okay, I'm working with BX. It takes about 18 months from project start to getting your first check with soil carbon. And it takes about 6 months to get a biochar credit. So you're talking quite long cycles here. But if you get into it, it's then every year after that. Yeah, so the farmer's in. We then recommend actions they can do. We've got something called SAM, which is called the Smart Agriculture Machine. It's the AI clever bit of our intelligence platform that gives recommendations. It supports that intelligence needed to generate more carbon credits or increase your biodiversity or all that kind of stuff. Because farmers, and I've been there myself, are unsure what to do. They're hearing all this stuff. I mean, my God, it's like so much information among all the other information they're receiving. They don't necessarily know what to do. So we're trying to help them.
All right. So you talked about making money for the farm, making money for the orchard vintner, that kind of thing. Now take me 1 to 5 years from now. Do I go to a store and I pick up a cantaloupe, a bag of apples, and it's got sustainability index 94.5. Just like if I go to Total Wine Store in Phoenix, where I live part of the year, and I walk through the wine section on my way to pick up my Coors keg, because I've drank half of an ounce of wine in my life, so I do walk by them. I don't have any idea what those numbers mean, but I see that there's a wine rating. Is that what we're going to have? Because that's subjective as hell. Or are we going to have it to where it's got an actual number that is quantified that, I don't know, some government agency monitors, or in the case of you buy an electrical cord and it says UL listed or something like that? What happens 5 years from now? Do I as a consumer even see what you're measuring?
I hope so. And I think that every retailer and brand will pick their own way through this. But as a consumer, we don't understand our food. I was having a conversation today with a very intelligent person about very high fidelity data sets around nutrition. We don't know, right? I eat every day like you do, and I have no idea what I'm putting in my mouth. I've only can assume, we look at the different things. We as consumers need to understand our food better. And I'm going to quickly talk about nutrient density here because I think this is something that I'm really excited about. Well, what we can help our farmers do. If you are a farmer who's investing in soil health, which most farmers do because they care deeply about soil health,
Yep.
and then you should be, in doing so, increasing your nutrient density. Your food should be getting better for human health.
Yeah, well, obviously fertility and minerals in the soil, and then the right fungi to bacteria ratio creates healthier plants. Healthier plants create healthier fruit, seed, vegetable, whatever, which then we digest. Absolutely. And that's a different story really than what BX is, but it's kind of tied. You guys walk down the same aisle because you're talking about a sustainability thing.
So we say the same thing. So that data we're collecting about sustainability is also equally featuring in the nutrient density of that product.
Yep.
So we hope that data sets will be adopted in that respect. So when you go back to that consumer, what they're picking up, our data will feed into some kind of labeling. Like, we don't want to be the labeler. We've got something called BX Verified, which is a thing you can scan, but it's more for the wine world right now who directly communicates to their consumer.
Yeah.
Now, when there is a legislation come through, whenever that is, 5, 10, 15, 20 years time, and I think it will happen, they're going to need people like BX who are verifying those data sets on behalf of those farmers. And in doing so, that farmer is getting a bigger slice of the action because the farmer will switch off from ultra processed foods. Sorry, not the farmer. The consumer will have to switch off because it's crazy what's happening right now. Moving from Europe to US, the ultra processed food thing is scary out here. I mean, I'll be super real with you. Like, it's scary. You walk into a supermarket and it's tough to find that amazing produce that is available. And you talk about it's a demand problem, right? If we can raise demand by 10% in global ag, there is no problem here. Every farmer is profitable, But right now, that's not happening. People are choosing a processed, processed biscuit versus an apple. That's crazy, right? We are human beings, and longevity is really important. But I think the consumer is just so confused with what's happening. Farming is amazing. We produce a very healthy product.
So the last question: if I'm a consumer 5 years from now, whether I'm buying that processed biscuit or hopefully that apple, I want to see a sustainability rating that is quantifiable versus subjective, like the wine rating, where it says, "Oh, our sommelier claimed this Sauvignon Blanc has got a wine rating of 94." That means to do that means it has to be voluntary. Meaning like the non-GMO verified project, which of course I generally oppose, but these kinds of things, or like the UL listing kind of a thing, where I'm a company, I sell apples, and I'm going to then say this is BX verified to be sustainability rating of 97.3.
Yeah. And so we have a rating internally at BX, which is called the BX score. It's a rating out of 1,000 that rates that product out of 1,000. That's an internal metric. Our clients use that to benchmark their internal farming assets. We're starting to unlock a community approach towards that so they can see what other people have got on the BX platform, which is quite interesting.
But do you think that eventually the consumer, meaning me as a buying consumer, will see some level of that rating and then it'll influence my decision?
I go back to my point. It will depend on who you buy your food from. Retailers, brands, they will pick and choose their own way through this. Right? We are not that. We are the one that's behind.
Unless it becomes government mandatory.
If it becomes federal, then that all changes everything, and there will be a big move towards that. But I think, I go back to I'm a farmer. I keep going back to that because it's really important. Like, I, as a farmer, had the same supply and demand issues that's currently happening now. We were smashed by European imports. I mean, it was just crazy. The year that Poland had a huge crop was a year that my product halved in price. It was tough. The world is totally oversupplied right now. We need to create the end consumer has to start understanding that this stuff's good for them, and they have to start buying more of it versus the ultra processed food. And I don't think there's a person in the world that wouldn't agree with that, which is interesting here. As long as the price is right and the claims are correct and validated, that should be a direction of travel. But right now, we're potentially facing into one of the biggest economic recessions the world's ever seen. If it's cheaper and it's ultra processed and it tastes good and it's got loads of salt and sugar in it, they're going to go for it.
You don't consider hot dogs to be ultra processed and bad for you, do you? Because I'm a really big fan of hot dogs. I like them like 3 a week, maybe like for breakfast
Those
with
Costco hot
sauerkraut.
dogs are outrageous. I mean, gosh, those Costco ones are just delicious. Delicious.
His name is Ben Bardsley. He's the founder and CEO of a company called BX. If you want to learn more about the company, first off, Ben's now connected with me on LinkedIn, and you can find him there. Where else do they find BX?
So www.bx.tech is our domain name. Find me on LinkedIn, Ben.Bardsley. We're pretty prevalent on the guy with the orange background in my picture. Pretty hard to miss. It'd be great to connect with people.
Thanks for being here. I do think we're going to be revisiting this topic as time goes on, because now we're actually talking about not just sustainability being a marketing phrase, but actually having some degree of quantifiable meaning. And that's where it's going to have to be before it loses the BS factor for people like me. BX, correcting the BS factor in food and agriculture. Anyway, always have like having entrepreneurs on here with fresh ideas. That's why you tune into the Business of Agriculture. More than 400 episodes. It's really cool to be out here every Monday. Please do follow me. Subscribe to my YouTube channel. Go to YouTube, type in Damian Mason and subscribe. It doesn't cost anything. You can also check out this show on Acres TV. If you like what you see and you're a fan of what I produce, go check out my show, The Granary. It's shot at my on-farm tavern here with my friends from XtremeAg. You can find it at the XtremeAg webpage, XtremeAg.farm, or you can also go on, when you're on YouTube subscribing to my stuff, go to XtremeAg's YouTube page and subscribe there. Till next time, he's Ben Bardsley, I'm Damian Mason, and this is the Business of Agriculture.
Thanks, Daniel.
Hey, sincere thanks for joining us here on another episode of the Business of Agriculture. I want to ask you, if you farm, are you looking for more productive efficiencies to grow higher yielding, better performing crops? Well, of course you are. New Fields Ag provides a complete portfolio of biological products focused on you, the farmer. If you want to learn more about the New Fields Ag product lineup, go to newfieldsag.com for information.